The only problem is I had a very red head yesterday. And Joan Phipps told me that I would because I was out at the yard sale without a hat on. So it hurt last night because it all got tight, like wearing something that doesn't quite fit. Anyway. That's the problem when you have no hair, but that's the way it goes. So I have a story for you that you haven't heard before. You might have heard it somewhere else, but you haven't heard it here before. And of course we know that this is an old story because this is our desert cloth, our Holy Land cloth. This is the cloth that tells us that this story happened in the land where Jesus lived and told people about God. And like a couple of the stories that I've told in the last few weeks, this is another one that happened after Jesus had died. So this was a story about the people that kept doing what he had been hoping people would do. And this story is about a woman named Tabitha. Tabitha. She's small, isn't she? Well, this was actually a woman, but you'll see when I bring the other ones out why she's this size. So this is Tabitha, and Tabitha was a very generous and kind woman. She spent all of her life doing things for other people. She made clothes for other people. She would make sure they had something to eat. Anyone who needed help, Tabitha was there to help. And she lived in a little town called Joppa. Yeah, it was a little town, and the name was Joppa. And it wasn't very big, but there were a fair number of people who lived there, and she spent all of her life in Joppa helping the people that lived in that town. And she lived in a really nice house there. A very nice house.
Was she rich?
Well, we're not sure, but we think she probably had some money because she was able to help people. You have some money. Anyway, this story starts kind of sad because when this story first happens, Tabitha has died. After doing all these things, Tabitha has died. And so she is laying in her bed in her house, and she has died. And there were many women, many that she had helped, that were there with her, and they were all crying. They were all really sad because they thought so much of her and she wasn't with them anymore. And what they did is they had brought all the different clothes that she had made for them, and they laid them out all around her to remind them of the kinds of things that she did for them. And so all these beautiful clothes, these tunics and dresses were all laid out around Tabitha. And all of these women would keep touching the fabric and crying and remembering how much they had loved her and appreciated what she did. Well, while this was happening, one of Jesus' followers, named Peter, was in another town. He was over telling people about God, as Jesus had done, in another town. And this was the town of Lydda. Lydda. And it was another little town. It wasn't very far from where Tabitha lived. is that two men that knew Tabitha left Joppa and they walked all the way to Lydda to find Peter. And they said to Peter, we want that, and Peter knew Tabitha, and they told Peter that Tabitha had died, and they wanted Peter to come to see Tabitha. Well, Peter had no idea what he could do, but he thought he should go. So he went with these men back to Joppa and to Tabitha's place. And when he entered the house, he saw all the women there, and he saw Tabitha laying in her bed, and he said to the women, I'd like to be alone with her for a minute. And so he asked them to leave. And so they left the house and waited outside. And Peter went over to Tabitha. And he looked at her for a minute, and he really didn't know what to do. And so he turned and he looked out the window for a bit, and he began to pray. And he wasn't even sure what he wanted to say. He just thought maybe he needed to pray. And finally he said, thank you, God, for this great woman. Thank you for her life. And then, strangest thing happened. This is what these stories do sometimes. He went over and he knelt beside Tabitha, and he leaned down close to her and he whispered in her ear, Tabitha, get up. Can you imagine? Tabitha, get up. And he waited. And after a few minutes, her eyes started to twitch. Her eyes started to twitch. And then she opened her eyes. She opened her eyes. She saw Peter, and she reached out with her hands to Peter. And Peter reached over, and he helped her up. And they both stood there in the room, all by themselves, in silence. And then, all of a sudden, they burst into laughter. They started to laugh. They laughed so hard that their sides hurt because they couldn't believe what had happened. And they hugged each other. And when the women heard the laughter, they came running into the room. They couldn't imagine why they'd be laughing. And they saw that Tabitha was alive. And then the two men that had gone to Peter came in and saw that she was alive. And then all the men that were followers of Jesus in that city also arrived, so that everybody was there to see that Tabitha was alive. I wonder how Peter felt when he found out that Tabitha had died. I wonder how he felt. Do you think he was sad? I wonder how Peter felt when she opened her eyes. Surprise. I'd be surprised. I wonder how Tabitha felt when she realized she was alive. Whoa. Surprised too? Yeah. Astonished. Yeah. Good word. You know, the story finishes by saying that all these people suddenly felt the Spirit of God. They felt the Spirit. I wonder what that Spirit feels like. What do you think it feels like? Maybe like the warmth of sort of. And we're going to sing a song together now called